Call this meeting to order. This is a city council work session. It's 6 p.m. on Monday, April 21st. Will the clerk take the roll?
Oh, we can pledge allegiance.
No? Yeah, we can do the Pledge of Allegiance. My bad. It's not on my agenda. The clerk take the roll?
Councilmember Murray.
Yeah.
Councilmember Middleton.
Present.
Councilmember Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councilmember Rathmel. Present. Councilmember Matavetsky.
Present.
Council President Pro Tem Hotchkiss.
Present.
And Councilmember Dunn absent.
Okay, the first item we have on the agenda is RL 25-82 in finance. And our presenter is Fire Chief Al Gardner, and I don't see him here right yet.
He's not here, and CR is also not here at an engagement tonight, so Bob, do you happen to know the story about the actual accident? Because that's really what I'm interested in. Well, there's a reason not to. Yeah. Well,
so I have to look and see what this specific one is for. But I do know that the vehicle was hit. And obviously this is to fund the repairs for it. We'll go and seek reimbursement from the individual that hit the vehicle, the city vehicle, to recover the cost of it. I know that we have several fire vehicles that are down for repairs, so there's a certain sense of urgency to try and get these approved and funded for repair.
well, I was just going to comment that this will ultimately, as long as you sign off, this will come out of the M Fund vehicle repair line, which has a $50,000 budget in it already, and we don't have it in the last several years even come close to that. So I don't think there's a need to have this RL essentially. So, and there's a budget in the, the check from the insurance company is going to come in, you're going to put it in the revenue line anyway, and there's already a budget in the repair line in the M Fund for $50,000. So I don't know why we need to do a transfer. And also there's a mistake on the transfer sheet. The expense line is it should be adjustment to the revenue side, and it's both listed as expenses. So I'm saying we don't really need to do it.
I do have, I mean, at least one specific question.
Oh,
Should
yeah, sure.
I direct them to Robert? Or like typically when we have a presenter, we can ask the person that introduced the legislation the questions. I mean, I appreciate that Bob is here and is willing to answer questions, but I also am not sure why the scheduled presenter wouldn't be here to introduce it and then answer questions. I just don't want to set a precedent of being like, oh, you couldn't make it, so let's ask Bob.
Well, yeah, so in the past, under the previous comptroller, these RLs were usually handled by finance. He's trying to put these back into the departments. So that may be a reason that, I don't know if Chief Gardner, we'll check with him and we can certainly have him. But my agreement would be, we don't even need to do this. But also it comes out of Bob's, it's the money comes out of risk, is under insurance fund and it's risk management, yeah, it's from his department anyway.
My office oversees the insurance funds that we use for these repairs.
I can appreciate that. And it's not at all that I wouldn't think you're not knowledgeable about the funds going out or coming in or the BLI itself. My question is specifically to the vehicle identified. And I guess I'll just Okay, I guess I'll ask it, but I do want to represent that I typically would expect that the individual who is introducing a request for legislation appears to answer any related questions. That is an expectation that I think we collectively have been clear on. And I maintain that preference.
Yes, and sorry, just to cut you off, and not only that, usually if they're not here, we just skip it. So that is kind of what we've been doing.
And I
And that's
guess-
no knock at all to Chief Gardner. He's been present before. I'm sure he's able to answer questions. This is not personal toward him or his department in any regard. I just don't want to set. I mean, we've had in the past other departments who consistently refuse to show up to present, and that's a problem. So I don't want to make it okay for one person and not okay for another department.
But
It-
I
it's al-
remember in the past that sometimes the people whose names are on the sheets are not necessarily aware that they are listed as the presenter. The person submitting is not necessarily the person whose name's attached to it.
Yeah, that's fine, but then we'll just, usually then if they don't know, then we just take it back and they come back again.
So how about we just move on past this? Councilman Kavanaugh will reach out to.
Wait, he,
First, I think, would you like to ask a question that we can get an answer to or get a present?
Not if we're gonna revisit this at another time.
Well, I am in favor of this just not moving forward because I don't think we need to increase the money in the vehicle line, the vehicle repair line for any particular reason now, because we never get to it. We haven't been hitting that threshold. And if we're hitting a $50,000 repair threshold for some reason, we should revisit it then. This is functionally putting an extra $8,000 in a line that already has $50,000 in it that we haven't touched yet.
yeah, I think that's fine, but I think just the whole conversation in general should just wait until everything is like all together, but that's just my opinion. I understand like where you're coming from. And I understand that, but I think just we need a whole, before we can even make that decision, we need the presenter to be here to talk about it. And then after that, we can make that decision. But I think until we have the presenter here to talk about anything, we can't even make that decision.
I think can I just clarify? Are you saying, Robert, that you don't think that it's even necessary to invite the presenter back because this RL is not necessary?
Correct.
So then we don't need to revisit it then. So then what is the process if you're saying that it's not necessary to even invite a presenter back to discuss it because it's not necessary?
Yeah, this is a weird situation. Yeah,
I think
so-
to Councilmember Middleton's point, though, we don't have someone present who can help inform the conversation, which is where we're limited in determining whether or not it should move forward or is unnecessary.
Well, that's why I was.
I answer the specific piece of like the budget movement. I think we do need that because like essentially the way it functions, right, is you're taking, one piece is taking money out of the M line to pay for the repairs. But then we have to increase our insurance recoveries for our anticipated recovery against
No,
the insurance. No?
no, and CR agrees with me.
Oh, okay.
Because we have an anticipated recovery amount for the year
Right.
and we have an anticipated expense amount for the year, and we're not close on either of those things. So
I'll defer to.
it
But
would just
still-
be
Still not
adding
something
cushion
we
to the
can ask.
cushion, essentially.
All right, can we move on? We'll send some emails, ask some questions,
Sure.
and then have the chief come back if we think
The
that.
chief is not going to have an answer to this type of question.
Okay,
Robert, I appreciate you, but I do feel like you're making some assumptions, and there are others here who would like to ask questions.
At least know the background of what's going on. But yeah, sorry.
okay. It's all gonna get sorted out. All right. We're gonna move on to RL 25-83 in Public Works. This is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into agreement with Broome County Our presenter is the Director of Economics, Sarah Close, and I'm going to pass this over to Councilmember Middleton.
Okay. Hi, Sarah, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So this is RL 25-83, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Broome County. So can you talk about that, please? Thank you.
Yes, so this is resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Broome County to accept grant funds not to exceed $211,065.65 under a New York State Department of State Greater Binghamton Fund I-District's Art Parks Grant. Funds will be used to improve a pedestrian alley between Washington and State Streets and to complete a mural on the Shenango Street Viaduct. So these are funds that date back to about 2018 that were applied for by the county through the Greater Binghamton Fund, which was a $20 million fund of Upstate Revitalization Initiative funds that were authorized in 2015. They created this special carve out for the I districts, which are defined downtown areas in Binghamton, Johnson City, and Endicott. Broome County applied to manage this large murals and mosaics fund. This is kind of the last piece of that. And just as they've had some staffing changes and we've been working through both of these different grants, it just made sense to basically sub-allocate the money to the city. I work really closely with Stephanie Brewer in Broome County Planning to monitor all of the compliance requirements with this. We've been going back and forth in this work plan for probably a year and a half now. And have finally kind of gotten the file papered, and this is really just the final piece of it. So the two particular projects are, quote unquote, it was called Art Parks funding, which was one pot of money that Broome County applied for. And that was to do placemaking projects that involved public art in any of these I districts. This alleyway that is between Washington and State Streets is adjacent to the Forum, between the Forum and Crowbar, which I cannot remember the address of right now. I apologize. I think it's 195 State. To create a pedestrian connection, the idea is that it is connecting the two nodes of the Downtown Arts District, formerly known as the Deco District. Phase 1 was completed, pardon me, in 2023, and we are embarking on phase 2 now. So this will just create that pedestrian connection. It will mean that people don't have to go all the way to the ends of the block to cross. People frequently park on State Street and farther east and then move west towards the Forums. This just gives kind of easy access. There's one pedestrian alley between Washington and State right now that's adjacent to the federal building, and you kind of go under a fire escape stairs, and it's not super pleasant pedestrian experience. So this would just be to create a better experience, add some public art. The first part of this that is through the
Is that the Crowbar? Is that the Crowbar area?
Yes,
Just
yep.
so I'm visualizing the right place. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you go a little bit farther, there's some streetscape plans in there that show where it is as well. Apologies, I lost my train of thought. So the initial portion of this is a small portion of the Deco Phase 2 Downtown Arts Phase 2 project that was just bid out and accepted the bid from Vacri. It's an additive, as you can see in the paperwork that was attached here. So they'll do the base work as part of Deco Phase 2, which is just basically new sidewalks, concrete to make the area better. And then we'll go out to bid for the public art that will be part of this. We don't have a super strong vision in mind. I think lights would be ideal, some way to have lighting that is also public art. And we have a couple of interesting models from around the country that we've pulled up as examples. So we're optimistic we'd be able to get an artist who wanted to do a light installation in that alley. And I can move on to the mural, but I can take questions on the alley first, if that's helpful.
Go ahead.
Who owns what property wise, and the art is going on a building that obviously we don't own, right? So how does that all work out?
Yeah, great question. So we're in negotiations to purchase the parcel of land between Crowbar and the Forum. So we have a conveyance map for that, and we're currently just negotiating prices with the property owner. But they have indicated their intent to sell to us to facilitate this. They see the value for both their business, but also for the larger district, and have been kind of compelled by the vision of the city to create this pedestrian area through.
And that's Dan Sharp?
That's correct.
And then for same question for 45, but the viaduct adjacent, never mind, we haven't gotten there yet.
That's next, right?
But we would not be putting, the vision at this point is not to put the art on the private building. It's to work with the Forum and Chris Marion and the county to put it on the arena side. Both parties have agreed that if there was anything that would go over the alley, like string lights, that they're both comfortable having anchors in their property. And then the arena has indicated that they, pardon me, are open to a larger public art piece on their side of the property. And we've looked into it with historic preservation guidelines, and there's nothing sensitive about that particular wall.
My question to start with is, we just bid this out and we got it back, and I believe that this strip was part of the bid. So did they already have that in their plans and then have that part of their bid? And then how does this like fit into that? Because we're seeking different funding.
Yes, so we had them bid it as an additive. I think it's additive 1
Okay.
on the document. And that was because we didn't have this in place and we wanted to be able to pull that out of the bid if these funds did not materialize, and to really cleanly separate it from the larger project. So we had them bid it as that additive that's shown in the map.
Okay.
And these grant funds will fully cover the work, the base work for the alley.
Okay, thank you. And then for the mural or whatever art is put in there, that gets put out for bid also, like both the concept and how does that piece work? It seems a little bit different than construction.
Yes, yep, good question. So for the art park, the art alleyway is kind of what we've been calling it, just colloquially. That we will do some level of a full procurement. I don't know exactly what it'll look like. I'll work with Bernice to figure out, because you're right, it doesn't fit under a traditional like infrastructure project, but it's also quite a large dollar value. So we'll do some level of public procurement in line with our guidance. Not 100% sure what that'll look like. One of the things that's nice is that since the county has been managing this across all 3 I districts, they have a lot of documentation built out and paperwork that we can go off of, in the way that they've done calls for artists and calls for walls. They've worked with the Broome County Arts Council extensively to kind of have them be almost like a partner or a subrecipient that does some of that procurement on their behalf, just being a subject matter expert and having more of those connections. So those are all things that we can explore. Frankly, I'm focused on getting the first part of the project done, and that's a problem for future Sarah to solve. But we're pretty happy with the amount of money that's left over after the alleyway. I don't remember it off the top of my head, I apologize, but it's over $100,000 it'll be available for art. That was a limiting factor in some of the other projects that the county was working on, was that they just didn't budget enough for the actual art part of it. So they had a nice park or a little parklet, but then there was no actual art in it because there wasn't enough money in the budget. So we kind of did this the reverse way, where we made the base improvements are pretty inexpensive, and then there's a bunch of money left over to do the actual art.
Yeah, it says 158,000, I think.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
And I can speak to the mural as well. It's slightly different when it comes to how we're doing procurement on that, but I can get into the whole thing if anyone.
Anybody have any other questions about the alleyway piece of it?
No.
Okay.
So for the mural, we have 45 Lewis Street listed there just because there's no real address for it. It's a city-owned wall. The Shenango Street Viaduct. The pictures are bad, I apologize. But if you're essentially on Google Street View and you're looking at the Marconi Tower and you turn your little guy around on the screen, you're looking at this viaduct. So it is city-owned. We've already sent it we get all of our walls cleared through SHPO before we start any of these mural projects, and Stephanie Brewer at the county did that for us, and we have all that documentation. So that is publicly owned. For the murals and mosaics project overall, the county's already done all of the procurement for it. So they created a number of lookbooks. I think there were at least 2. They did one that was a generic lookbook that different building owners could kind of choose from, like pre-certified, pre-qualified artists. So that's the lookbook that we worked from when we've been trying to get this going. And then they also had a specific call for a wall in Johnson City that was roughly the same size. That never went forward. So we reached back out to those artists to see if any of them were interested in repurposing the designs, just to kind of create some efficiencies and not do a whole new call. I will say very few of the artists that work on this program are from Broome County. We do have a couple that are certified, who are living in this area or have affiliation with the university. Most of these artists are traveling, and have been throughout the life cycle of the project.
I think my initial, so the murals have to be within the I district, but then who gets to pick the walls that are?
Yeah, so the county did a number of calls for walls. So we went through those, and one of the ones that we had submitted was the city submitted the Holly Street parking garage and then this viaduct. So we were part of the solicitation that already went out for locations. I do know, and I hope I'm not telling tales out of school, I know the county's interested in doing more of this. It's a very, very popular program, and there's a number of people that wanted projects and their schedules didn't work out, or when they sent their walls to historic preservation, they were denied for whatever reason, or they weren't interested in doing the prep work on the wall. So there's a number of properties that the property owners were really interested, but the building itself or the wall itself wasn't necessarily a good fit. So I think there's a lot more interest out there than there is funding available.
Right. And the Holly Street parking one, I remember Rich David, like when that went up, he was talking about it. So every time I look at it, I'm like, that's a big canvas.
Yeah, we originally wanted to do, there's a muralist who is on a mission to paint, and I'm gonna forget the number, but the number of bees, the minimum number of bees that you would want to have in a healthy hive. And so he's going around to different places in the world and painting these, and we really wanted to get him to do bees on the Holly Street garage, but he won't respond to my emails. So unfortunately, we are going with a slightly smaller wall just based on the budget that we have.
Thank you.
So for the first project identified as improvements to the walkway adjacent to 195 State Street that is privately owned currently, but we're purchasing it from the owner, Dan Sharp. The second project, public art installation at the viaduct adjacent 45 Lewis Street, current city-owned property, but adjacent to Stadium 45, correct? Which is owned by developer Mark Unati.
That's correct.
Station 45.
Station 45. I've not been there, but thank you for the correction. The memo attached in the materials represents these projects to be in line with the goals of the Greater Binghamton Fund. Those are identified as commercial and mixed-use property revitalization, housing rehab, and streetscape improvement. Do you know what percentage respectively could be broken out within those three goals in terms of funding allocations for each?
Not at the top of my head, but it is in the strategic investment plan that I can send you. It's on the state's website.
Okay. Thank you. Any ballpark in terms of streetscape improvements compared to housing rehab or property revitalization?
I know it was primarily, so the way that those three buckets are broken out in the way the state sees it, Empire State Development was managing all of those commercial mixed use projects. Department of State was managing all of the public streetscape improvement projects. And then HCR was managing, Homes and Community Renewal was managing the housing projects. So I believe that Homes and Community Renewal was managing 3 projects in the Greater Binghamton Fund area. And then the balance were ESD and Department of State, but I don't know what those funding numbers are off the top of my head.
But that's in the report.
Yes, and I will say not all of those projects advanced. That document's from 2018, and a significant number of them were either modified or not completed, but you can kind of see the initial intent of the plan as it came through.
Is there a deadline for funds spent?
Yes, I believe, sorry, these 2 contracts, they have different ones, and I'm not remembering which one is which. I believe they want these done by the end of 2025. No, I apologize. The next one they want done by the end of 2025. This one, I believe, is by the end of 2026. And that's in line with the Department of State contract that the county currently holds. Let's see if I have that somewhere. Yeah, May 31st, 2026.
And these are all previously identified projects that were included in the application, have been awarded, so there's no wiggle room in terms of adjustments to the funding for the projects?
I think at this point, after the several years of negotiations we've been with trying to get these funds spent under Department of State purview and approvals, that it would be unlikely that we'd be able to kind of go back to the drawing board and renegotiate these. These were not projects that were originally applied for through the application. The application was just a fund, and then the county ran a competitive process through the fund. So this is the very tail end of that 6-7 year process at this point. And DOS very much wants us to close the contract out and move on.
What would the process to I understand your representation of it being unlikely to make changes. What would the process be if that were pursued?
I believe you'd have to work with the county and the Department of State to determine what would be eligible underneath the project funding source.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for Sarah? All right. So we're going to move on to RL 25-84. This is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with New York State Department of State for a BOA grant.
Yes.
And this is in planning with Councilmember Rathmel.
I think I'm just going to kick it to you. I don't know that I need to repeat the RL.
Sounds good.
Okay.
This is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with New York State Department of State for a Brownfield Opportunity Area Grant in an amount not to exceed $500,000 for pre-development activities at 187 Clinton Street. You may recall I came down here last month. Looks like it was adopted 3/12/25 to request that this council authorize us to enter into a memorandum of understanding, some level of subrecipient agreement with the Metro Group. That document enabled New York State Department of State to finalize our contract and send this document back. So this is kind of that next logical step that we thought we might be able to go through in March, but this is that like final where we're actually creating the funding line, having the grants come in. That subrecipient agreement that was approved by this body enabled us to get to this point with New York State, if that makes sense.
It I think it does.
Okay.
That was my primary question related to this RL compared to the March 12th RL. So if I'm understanding that relationship and the status of the project correctly, it's a progression of the paperwork from the services agreement to this agreement. It's not an additional 500,000, or it is additional funding.
No, it's the same funding.
Okay.
Yep. And I can go through the project as well, but I just wanted to tie that back to the legislation that was down last month. So this is a $500,000 grant with a $55,555 match. That match is provided by the Metro Group, but there is no financial responsibility for the city of Binghamton in this. So this is $555,555 towards pre-development activities at 187 Clinton Street as it relates to their design and pre-development work, specifically as it relates to their brownfield cleanup program tax credit application. This contract took a very long time to put together to the extent that basically all of the work that is subject to this grant has already been completed. So we will advance this contract, and then we will pretty quickly move towards requesting reimbursement for the money that has already been expended on the property. There is a work plan in here that has the specific documents that need to be generated and provided to both the city and to the Department of State in order for them to send this back. So it's architectural services for the development of site-specific schematic design documents, design development documents, and bidding and construction and supporting materials. So they'll have to provide that. I believe they have to provide at least up to 90% construction 100% construction drawings, that project finance closing documents, and updated renderings culminating in a 90% design and construction document. That'll have to be provided to both the city of Binghamton and the New York State Department of State, as well as documentation that the $555,000, apologies, was spent in accordance with New York State law. And I'm happy to answer any questions about this.
So Metro Group's the subrecipient, city is recipient. who handles or who's responsible for the compliance with the state to actually get the reimbursement? Is it something your office is handling, they're handling, or?
Yeah, so my office will handle the paperwork side of things in terms of collecting all of those documents and making sure that this contract is filled out. In terms of actually doing the work within compliance and being eligible for reimbursement, that falls on the Metro Group. Basically, if they don't provide documentation that allows me to substantiate the terms of the contract, then the city doesn't get paid, they also don't get paid, and we have no money in this particular part of the project.
And since most of the work is done, they've been paying the bills, so it's all on their head.
Somewhat,
essentially.
yes. There's a number of other grants in this project as well, but yes, we did not front the money for this grant to them in order for them to do the project.
I guess my initial question is kind of a more abroad about Brownsfield grants. There's like a few different Brownsfield sites within the city, and are the awards just like site specific, or is it like a citywide award?
Yeah, so great question. You can apply for Brownfield Opportunity Area. I believe they're implementation grants, technically what they're called, for any Brownfield Opportunity Area that has been approved by New York State. So the city of Binghamton has 3. One is the First Ward BOA, Brownfield Opportunity Area BOA. The North Shenango BOA, which includes Binghamton Plaza, and the Brandywine BOA that includes the Stowe site. So any projects or properties in any of those BOAs are technically eligible as long as they meet the other criteria of the grant. So when this opportunity first came up, we applied for this, I believe in 2022, it might have been 2023, I apologize. We had been actively working with the Metro Group to try to find a way to get the housing project financed there. And this just was another piece of the capital stack that we could put together to try to make the numbers work on the project. And also because it is a Brownfield Opportunity Area, and brownfields are interesting because just because you're located in a Brownfield Opportunity Area does not mean that your property is in fact a brownfield. But in New York State, they define brownfields as anything that is difficult to develop based on the real or perceived environmental contamination on the site. So you can apply for BOA funding even if your property is not a brownfield, because it is in the BOA, there is some assumption that there is environmental contamination, and that makes it a harder site to develop, even if there is no actual contamination. There are other higher levels of environmental remediation money, including the Brownfield Cleanup Program tax credits, where you are required for that to be an actually contaminated site that you are cleaning up in order to be eligible for those funds. So it's a little bit of a weird nuance, but it's kind of like if you're in the BOA, it's harder to be developed because you're nearby contamination or associated with contamination in some way. So there's some extra money from the state to enable people to kind of navigate those development challenges.
Right. I guess specifically, is it the state only awards the city of Binghamton BOA money, a set amount of BOA money, like irrespective of which site it is, or is it like site 1, there can be up to $1 million, site 2 up to $1 million, and site 3 up to.
So the funding program is up to $500,000 total. I believe the municipality gets 1 application per cycle. The cycle opens every summer through the consolidated funding application. I believe, although I would have to double check this, that you have to be one of the sponsoring organization of the BOA plan in order to apply. So for instance, the Brandywine BOA, the county sponsored the creation of that BOA plan. So the county is the one that applied for the funds through New York State, not the city, even though we're partners on that project with the county, but it's like their BOA, so they apply for the funds for it.
Okay, thank you.
And it's as you can see by the numbers, it's up to a 90% match of a total project cost up to $500,000. So if you had a smaller project, you could apply for 90% below that $500,000 threshold.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions on this one? Okay, thank you, Sarah.
No problem.
And our last RL is RL 25-85. This is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into agreement with Family Enrichment Network in support of the water shut off displacement prevention strategy. This was submitted by Council Member Rathmel, and it is in Municipal and Public Affairs with Council Member Middleton.
Thank you, Councilmember Hotchkiss. I'm excited about this one. This is RL 25-85, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into agreement with Family Enrichment Network and the support of the water shutoff displacement prevention strategy. So can you tell us about that?
Sure. So as all of you know, January 27th specifically, RL 2524 was introduced during work session to change essentially the accumulated amount of unpaid water bills that triggers water termination by the city. The reason for that change was sound. It was well articulated. It was fully supported. But when I inquired what protocol exists to ensure that tenants residing in the properties impacted by water shutoffs when their landlord fails to pay were not subsequently displaced once code deems their building uninhabitable due to lack of adequate utilities, it was clear that no such protocol existed and that had been overlooked. So Treasurer Harris, Council Heary, Councilmember Matovetsky, and I met a handful of times to really dig into the current process of what triggers a water shutoff notice, who is informed and how they're informed of that notice, and what local resources might be available to tenants who would be impacted. The entire goal is to prevent their displacement at no fault of their own, to I guess, broaden a little bit of what I said earlier. When utilities are shut off to a property and code is alerted, code can come out and placard that building as unfit for human habitation. For most tenants, most families who are staying in those buildings, that to them communicates that they have to find somewhere else to live, that they have to leave immediately. The language is strong, that they need to vacate, that they and so many of them will just relocate or attempt, I should say, to relocate. Many of them are unsuccessful in identifying alternative housing. Many of them end up having to access homeless services. So this, again, the goal of this was to prevent exactly that. Family Enrichment Network operates a homelessness prevention program called the Caring Homes Program, where some of these tenants would potentially be eligible for funds to assist with the payment, not of the delinquent water bills. I want to make sure I'm clear. This strategy would not cover the unpaid bills. We wouldn't be taking care of the delinquent amounts that property owners are actually responsible for. We would be supporting tenants in taking responsibility for those payments moving forward, so they're not at risk of termination in the future. So this MOU simply represents not the whole protocol, the whole strategy, but that partnership with Family Enrichment Network so that their program can be identified as a referral option to tenants who are impacted.
So Family Enrichment, they're just doing this for free.
So they already operate the Caring Homes Program, and eligible households for the Caring Homes Program are individuals through the ESG funding portion. Are individuals within the city who are at risk of homelessness, so at imminent risk of losing their place of housing or immediately needing to relocate. So part of the process, it's not necessarily new funding, it's that part of the process, although that's a possibility down the road. But at the moment, it would simply be letting tenants know that they're potentially eligible for this assistance that already exists. So it would be streamlining and informing them of the opportunity to apply. Part of the strategy as well would be letting tenants know that they can request a hearing to avoid the water being shut off. And it's that hearing that would essentially involve conversations about alternatives, whether it's the tenant assuming responsibility, taking advantage of pursuing the Caring Homes program, et cetera.
Thank you for that. So the city gets money from HUD, that's Home ESG, and Home ESG funds the Family Enrichment Network program that already exists.
It's not, it's ESG,
Oh,
HUD
what
ESG,
did I say?
home, which is a different bucket.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I apologize. So it's theoretically, if they're providing this additional service, it just strengthens their application for future funding with the city potentially. Okay. I want them to benefit in some way for trying to to help with this. I think that's all I have right now. Give me a second.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who's involved in this process. It's really needed, and I think this will, along with Good Cause and the other great things that we are doing on council, will definitely help with people in the homeless crisis that we have now here. So thank you both, and thank you, Bob, and everyone who worked on it. I just had a question. When do you see this going into effect?
So our hope was that it would be in effect prior to the next scheduled water shutoff dates, which are Monday, the 28th. I'm not sure if that's necessarily possible. We are still waiting on confirmation from Steve Carson within the planning department on the eligibility under HUD ESG. He sent, it is, I don't know if it matters, but it's my opinion based on my familiarity with the HUD regulations that it's eligible, but he did send an inquiry in writing to HUD. So I'm not sure whether that impacts. I mean, Family Enrichment Network is ready to move forward. So, I mean, ASAP is the goal, but I don't know if you have a different or additional information, Bob.
I haven't gotten an update from Steve yet on it, no.
Thank you so much.
So I don't want to make a guess at how the program works, but I'm not going to guess. Can you just explain like the process so I can visualize how the information flows?
For the strategy, the protocol? Sure. So the treasurer's office who handles water billing identifies the households who are at that accumulated amount that would trigger water termination. A notice is sent. I believe it's
Can I add in the one nice touch that the new treasurer has done, which is that phone list? That he's actually calling
Yep.
to, prior to doing the letters going out, is calling through that list.
I think
Or is
they're,
it in
it's
between?
backwards. Yep.
Backwards,
So
sorry.
there's no, that's okay. They're still sending the notice. But Treasurer Harris also inserted kind of a second touch attempt where his staff are reaching out by phone to the identified owners to just recoup what they can. And then once his department has made those phone calls, council is informed of, which this is everything moving forward from here is new and part of the strategy. Council is informed of the properties to be impacted. They're typically broken, not typically, they're very specifically broken out by district, and they're on a quarterly schedule of termination. Council is informed, council will have the opportunity to connect directly if possible to the impacted properties, owners or tenants. But ultimately, those tenants will be informed of, so we changed the format of the notice to really highlight the opportunity for tenants to request a hearing to avoid termination. And then Family Enrichment Network is also providing flyers representing the opportunity to access their program as an alternative. And all of that ideally would be done before the actual shut-off date.
I guess, is there, how does I think it would be the treasurer's, is there differentiation between like this is a homeowner versus this is a renter? Like how, I guess I can't think how it's like, you could say it's multifamily or it's a single family, and then that's kind of like what you're thinking of, but is there a different way that that's?
Do you mean how the water department is or whom we would be following up with? So the
You're saying
water
we
department.
get that list, the council's informed with a list, and the thing is, we don't necessarily know who on that list owns the property they're living in and who on the list, like which addresses are owner occupied versus which addresses are tenant occupied.
Do you want me to take this one? So the list that comes out, the city doesn't really have a good way of parsing out which houses have tenants in them versus owners necessarily. There's some that are easier than others, but to do it on a large scale basis is a little difficult. So the end list that gets provided is basically a breakout of everyone that hasn't paid after the city has sent a couple letters and they've done the phone outreach. And then there's also an additional posting that'll take place at the property, which is where that FEN flyer will be attached. With the idea being that the mailings might not necessarily get to tenants because they go to the address of whoever is paying the bill. And so those notices are required by law. So the posting is really where we're viewing it as an opportunity to flag to tenants outside of council's outreach that there's an opportunity for this potential funding, as well as to have the hearing for the water shut off. And that's how that sort of gets narrowed down. My understanding is that like the bucket we've gotten down to with the first round is down to about 10 properties. And I forget what we started at, but it was
50.
Yeah.
Was it 90 or 50? Is somewhere between 90 and 50. But so that's a great drop in number of people that are under threat of water shut off.
Quick opportunity to plug that it would be easier to identify the difference between an owner occupied property and a rental property if we had something called a rental registration and maybe even a licensing program.
So the if a tenant goes through this process, the original amount due is kind of held in forbearance by the city. And would that roll over to taxes as it has in the past? And
Yes.
then water stays on as long as the tenant or somebody is paying the bill going forward.
correct. So the way that the states kind of viewed this and the way case law is basically broken out is that tenants who aren't otherwise required to pay the water bill, if there's a shut off, they can request the hearing like an owner and have it transferred into their own name. When we do that, you can't really hold the tenant responsible for the back amount. The tenant can have the option of paying those off and using it to offset rent. But typically the way it gets set up is it's just going forward versus paying off the amount that's already due. And yes, that then rolls to taxes.
That's always been an option. We're just highlighting that and making it the process more transparent and more.
Yes,
Sort of,
much
yeah.
more advertised than I think what it was. And I mean, the whole process kind of getting revamped since there was a pretty long pause when the city was doing shut-offs. I think starting even a little bit before everything got shut down for COVID.
Anybody have anything else for Councilmember Rathmel? All right, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Make the
Motion.
motion.
Oh, second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Hi.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we're adjourned.